Hey, Todd Burrier from tburrier.com. You know, your brain is wired to make assumptions. That's how we store all this great information in this supercomputer of a head that we have, even though we don't always think of it that way. But you store everything. And so making assumptions is natural. Unfortunately, most people, right, me included, often think our assumptions are truth. Just because we have assumptions, just because we store information in certain ways, does not mean our assumptions are true. It's so critical to learn to test your assumptions. Otherwise, your assumptions are going to mess up your life in so many different ways. And in this video, I'm going to give you 4 specific areas and a couple of strategies to help you about dealing with your assumptions. Because your assumptions are good. They help you respond and act quickly or think quickly because they allow you to make connections and access information. But you've got to test your assumptions. You can't operate as if your assumptions are true. There's just simply too much that you and I don't know, right? The older you get, the more you're going to realize you don't know very much. You might know a lot about something, but truthfully, you don't know very much. There's too much to know. And even if we know all there is about something up to a certain point, within 5 more minutes, there's a whole bunch more stuff about it that we haven't heard about. So here's 4 areas of where you tend to make assumptions and what you can do about them, right? So the first is assuming you know what others mean when they communicate. This is probably arguably the biggest area of miscommunication on the planet. It so often happens every day, multiple times a day, in the corporate settings, in your personal relationships, etc. Someone says A and you think they said B. And so you respond to what you think they said, and then they hear something that they think you said, but it's not the same. I call that the communication gap. Very, very simple strategy. Take it in, take a breath, but don't react on what you think this person just said. Instead, clarify it, right? So said, if I'm following you, I think I hear you saying this. Is that what you're saying? That's really, really simple, right? Or you can say, I'm not sure I understand what you mean by that. Could you help me understand that? Very, very simple, right? And you'll find out, were you right or were you wrong? And more often than not, you're going to discover that if you had reacted to what you thought they meant, you would have been wrong, which A, would have broken rapport with the person, because then they'd be like, oh, Todd doesn't even get me, right? Or B, right, you might offend somebody or start an argument just because you didn't take that second. So that's the first one. The first major assumption most people make is what others mean. The second is assuming you know what others are going through. Let's face it, and especially in today's world, people have gone through all kinds of stuff. People are struggling in all kinds of areas, and it's really easy, if you've gone through something similar, to think you know how they feel. You don't. You don't know how somebody feels. You can't have any possibility of knowing what someone feels. You haven't lived their life. You haven't had their experiences. You don't have their lens. You don't have their situation. You haven't had their circumstances. You haven't had their set of struggles. You don't know how someone feels. And so instead of saying, I know how you feel, right, and then trying to tell them what they should do, which is the absolute opposite of what you should do, you simply use some empathy and say, it appears to me that you are feeling like this about this. That's all you have to do. And that person will then let you know if you're tracking or not, right? If you're not, they'll correct you, which is just fine, because you need to be corrected and you need to fully understand them, as opposed to reacting or providing advice or giving them a sermon or whatever because you think that you know how they feel, when in fact you can't know how someone else feels. They have their own unique experience. It's actually insulting for someone to say, I know how you feel. That's an insult. That's like saying, oh, I'm that simple. I'm that plain vanilla. I'm not that complicated. I'm a human, right? We're all complex, right? So the second one is, don't assume you know what others are going through. That's really easy. Use empathy and ask. The third, and this is another big area, I think it's a little bit less in today's world just because of the nature of our world, but you can't make assumptions about people based on what they wear, how they appear, what kind of language they use. You certainly can't make assumptions based on title or position. And that goes in, there's 2 sets of directions there, right? Appearance and language, usually someone will be a little bit, take the position that person might be beneath them, right? If someone isn't dressed well or isn't as well groomed, or maybe isn't using the same kind of diction or verbs or words or whatever. That's a mistake. I mean, that's such a massive, massive mistake, especially in today's world. Man, you just got no idea, right? I mean, all that is represents their upbringing and what they value as it relates to appearance. It has nothing to do with who that person is, what they're all about. The flip side of that is someone who has achieved a title or a position and then assume that this person is of good character or has great input. That's a mistake too, right? So all of those are forms of bias, both positive and negative. The bottom line is you have to suspend judgment, right? You have to completely suspend judgment and recognize that you're making judgment, and that most times you don't know, because you never know the backstory. You don't really know who someone is. Character is what tells you about a person, not anything related to materialism. Nothing like that. All right. So suspend judgment is the strategy, and dig a little deeper. And then the fourth thing are assumptions about self. And man, this one's a tough one, right? So the two quick little nuggets here. First would be where you have negative self-beliefs, or what I call limiting beliefs. You know, you think you can't do a certain thing, or a certain thing's not up your alley, or a certain thing's not for you, or whatever. How do you know? How do you know it's true, right? I mean, there's so many things I would be willing to bet that you haven't done in your life because you didn't think you could. And all you did was prove that it was true in your mind, but not in reality because you didn't try, right? So moral of that story is you don't have limits. I mean, yeah, you probably can't jump off a building and fly without the aid of a device. But as it relates to what you actually can do in this practical world, you really don't have much in the way of limits except what's in your head. And so don't make the assumption that you can't. All you're doing is keeping yourself from living. And then the second one is the assumption that, and this is a big deal in today's world, that your worldview is right. Your worldview might be right for you, but you have no place judging someone else's worldview. Right? That's theirs, right? That's theirs. That they are living their life. It's not your place to judge how they live, right? That leads to disrespect. And so the key here is to be open, be curious, right? Be curious. Why do they believe that? Ask. So what leads you to that? Why do you think that way? I don't see it that way, but I respect that you do. Can you share with me what you're thinking? Why you see it that way? What's led you to that? Boy, isn't that a different way to be than to be judgmental and negative about because someone's different than you? I mean, let's face it, we're supposed to be different. We're not supposed to fit in. We're supposed to fit together, which means we're all different little pieces that fit together. So, key point, test all assumptions. Do not act on an assumption. Do not speak on an assumption. I know it's not easy, trust me. I still mess this up all the time, but I'm conscious of it. I'm aware of it. But test your assumptions as often as possible, and it will make your life so much easier. If you got value from this and you want more content, as I've got a blog site, tburrier.com. There's a tremendous amount of content in there for personal development, health and wellness, leadership, training in all the core skills. And, I encourage you to go check that out. And by the way, on there is a free audio download, Overcoming Your 4 Barriers of Success, which speaks a lot to that last one I just mentioned, because those barriers are all negative beliefs typically that are correctable. And so I encourage you to go get that. And if you have a question, you want to reach out to me, my email is below. Shoot me a question and I'm happy to help if I can. Take care.